Hi, it's May 15, 2023, Monday afternoon, about 2 p.m. I'm Todd Dunn, and today I want to talk about my prostate biopsy. So where am I? Well, right now I'm sitting in my pickup truck at the Manset Town Dock on the south side of Southwest Harbor, looking across the outer edge of the harbor toward Greening Island with the hills of Mount Desert Island in the distance. And as you can see, there's starting to be some boats in the harbor. My boat goes in next week on Tuesday. So that brings us to the topic for today's video, which is my prostate biopsy. So yeah, I had a prostate biopsy Friday afternoon about between 3:30 and 4. So I want to talk very briefly about what led up to it, and then some of the details about the biopsy itself, and then a little bit about the aftermath of the biopsy. So why did I have a prostate biopsy? Back in December, I went to see my family doctor. Well, this was a new doctor, though, because my original family doctor retired. And this doctor is very thorough and had looked through all of my records and discovered that I had never had a PSA, prostate-specific antigen, blood test. So decided to order one. So I took a sample, sent it off. I didn't think anything of it. I don't have any symptoms of prostate problems. So that was that. And the test came back in a few days, and it was a little bit high. Now, for my age, at the time I was 70 when I took the test, the upper end of normal is about 6.5 on that test, and I came back at 7.1. So my family doctor said, we're going to refer you to a urologist for a little follow-up on this. So he referred me, and they set me up for an appointment about 3 weeks later in mid-January of this year. So I went to the urologist. He had the numbers, talked to him briefly, and he said, well, we can have you come back in a year and give you another PSA test, or we can be a little more aggressive, and I'll put you on some antibiotics for about a month, and then we'll have another PSA test and see what happens. So I said, well, let's be, the slightly more proactive approach. So we did that. Sorry for the break there. Had to open the window because it's getting kind of hot in the truck with the sun on it. So you're going to hear a little wind from outside. Anyway, so I had a second PSA test after I took antibiotics for a month, on the feeling that maybe the slightly elevated PSA was simply due to a mild urinary infection. Had another PSA, came back at 8. So the urologist said, well, it's time for you to have a biopsy. And he said, I can get you in about 2 weeks. At that point, I said, that's not going to work for me because this was on February 16. I said, on February 28, I'm having knee replacement surgery. And he said, oh, yeah, well, we don't want to do the biopsy and really close to that. So they rescheduled me for May 12. That gave me about 10 weeks, 11 weeks to recover from the knee surgery, and infection risk wouldn't be such a problem there. Blood-borne infections are a big deal following knee replacement surgery, so we didn't want to take any chances. So that's what led up to it. And so what about the biopsy itself? Well, the first thing I'll talk about is the preparation for the biopsy. They gave me 2 antibiotics to take, 2 pills the day before the biopsy, 2 pills of each antibiotic the day of the biopsy, and 2 pills of each the day after. And the specific antibiotics they gave me were cephalexin and ciprofloxacin, I think. And, the cephalexin's relatively benign. I didn't expect anything unusual from that, but the cipro I'll use an abbreviated version of it, has some pretty nasty side effects in some cases. So I was a little concerned about that, since one of the side effects is potential tendon rupture. And after the knee surgery, I didn't want to have to go through anything connected with tendon rupture. So, so I took the antibiotics the day before and the morning of the biopsy, and I also had to do one other thing 3 hours before the biopsy, and that's use one of these guys. This is an enema. And I've never had an enema before, so I was a little apprehensive about it. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be like. All I can say, it was a little uncomfortable, but other than that, it wasn't a big deal. And the purpose of the enema is just a little bit more cleaning out to minimize the possibility of infection. And the reason for using an enema for that is that the biopsy is done through the rectal wall. And you want to have that nice and clean before you start punching holes in it to do the biopsy. So what is a prostate biopsy? Well, what a prostate biopsy is, basically, is the doctor will insert hollow needles into your prostate to remove samples of tissue. And in my case, they did 12 total needle biopsies. 6 on each side of the prostate, since prostates are sort of bilobed, and 2 at the bottom, 2 in the middle, 2 at the top on each side. And the procedure is guided by an ultrasound, which they leave running, and they can see where the needles are going to go, and they can get everything lined up properly and do the actual biopsy. But where they put the probe for the biopsy sort of makes you feel like you maybe have been abducted by aliens, because the probe goes into your rectum. It has a special little tube for the biopsy needles to go through. So that's a little bit unpleasant, but not too bad. At least that's what I thought when I found out exactly what was going to happen. So I show up on the day of the biopsy. They took me into the room where it was going to be done. This is just at the doctor's office. And, did my vital signs and had me put a gown on and lie down on a sort of bed. And on my left side, and pull my knees up, which was a little hard because of the knee replacement surgery. My right knee didn't want to pull up quite as far as they wanted it to, but we managed. And then the doctor swabbed in a sort of combination lubricant and topical anesthetic onto my backside. And then he gave me a shot. And that was, I have to say, the most painful part of the procedure. And it was just a regular shot. Just felt a little prick and then a little burn as they injected a local anesthetic into the area. Then they gave me a minute or two for that to take effect and put the ultrasound probe in. Now, that didn't hurt, but it was, a little uncomfortable. It's not a place that I usually put things. And so it was not a lot of fun, but, it didn't last long. And then he started taking the biopsy cores. Now, the only thing about it that was a little disconcerting is that this particular doctor had a tendency to count down to each biopsy core. He would say, 3, 2, 1, go. And you would hear a click of the biopsy tool. And then I felt a sort of tap, like if I take this pen and tap it against my face. That's about what I felt. Just a very light tap on my prostate when the needle went in. No pain. And he did that 12 times. And once he was finished, They wiped me off a little bit to get the lubricants and stuff off of me, and a little blood. The gauze they used actually looked pretty bloody to me. And then they gave me a sort of adult diaper to put in my underwear to keep me from potentially bleeding onto everything. And had me sit there for a few minutes after I got dressed. And then said, "We'll see you in 2 weeks to get the result." And gave me a sheet of paper with expected side effects and some instructions, which were pretty benign. What were the expected side effects? Well, some pain. I have to say I didn't feel any pain at all. The only thing I felt at all after I got home was I felt the urge to go to the bathroom, and that turned out not to be a side effect of the biopsy. It turned out to be a side effect of the fact that I needed to go to the bathroom. And the other possible side effects are blood in urine, and that I noticed for 2 times after I got home that there was just a hint of blood in my urine, but then that went away. I never had any bleeding from the site afterwards. It's been 3 days now, so it was not a big deal from my perspective. I was much more concerned about it than I needed to be. It was a little bit uncomfortable. Largely the ultrasound probe was uncomfortable, but other than that, the procedure didn't hurt, and it was very quick. I'd say that the total procedure itself took 10 minutes. And I took longer getting ready for it, getting undressed and getting situated on the sort of bed that they had, and then getting up and getting dressed again. So it wasn't a big deal, and now I just have to wait until the 25th of May, another 10 days, to find out what is going to happen next. So all I can say is, if you get into a situation where your urologist says you need to have a prostate biopsy, I wouldn't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I was pretty concerned about them poking needles into me, but it was completely painless and not an issue at all. And I did not have any kind of tranquilizer or anything like that. So I drove myself to and from the procedure, and I wasn't uncomfortable on the way home. And basically I've had no pain at all associated with it. So not a big deal from my point of view. I'm not in a hurry to do it again, but there is a possibility that I will have to do another one maybe in 6 months to a year. It will depend on the results from this one. Okay, I thought I'd just talk about that to let people know what this little procedure is like from my personal experience. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope you found it interesting. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't, maybe you ought to think about subscribing to my channel.